If you have very few friends, society often assumes something must be wrong. Maybe you're antisocial. Maybe you're awkward. Maybe you just don't know how to connect. But what if the opposite is true? What if having very few friends is sometimes a side effect of seeing too much? Not socially, but psychologically. There is a strange pattern that appears in certain individuals. People who are competent, perceptive, ambitious, yet their social circles remain unusually small. Not because they dislike people, but because their mind processes social environments differently. If you've ever walked into a room, seen dynamics everyone else seems comfortable with, yet something in you immediately felt off, then this may explain something about how your mind works. Today we'll examine 7 psychological traits that often appear in people who have very few close friends. These traits don't make someone antisocial. They simply change how a person interprets people, status, and behavior. And many people who have these traits spend years believing something is wrong with them, before realizing the real issue is compatibility of perception. Isolation is often interpreted as an emotional problem, but in many cases, it begins as a pattern recognition difference. Consider a small moment in a workplace. An employee enters a salary review. The manager smiles warmly and says, "Your performance this year has been excellent." Then the conversation drifts away from compensation toward company culture, team spirit, future opportunities. Most employees feel reassured, but occasionally someone notices the structure. Praise first, deflection second, decision delayed. Once someone recognizes this pattern, they rarely stop noticing similar patterns elsewhere. The same thing happens in social situations. A friend repeatedly cancels plans. A colleague praises you publicly, but undermines you privately. A partner says they respect your boundaries, while gradually pushing them. Most people adapt to these signals, but some people notice the structure behind the behavior. And that difference leads to the first rare trait: precision pattern recognition. Some people listen to conversation at the level of words. Others perceive the patterns underneath them. Tiny shifts in tone, micro-expressions, the timing between statements. Psychologists call this thin-slice cognition. The brain extracts meaning from very small signals. Someone might say, "I'm really happy for you," but your brain registers subtle inconsistencies. The smile arrives slightly late. The voice tightens. The eyes narrow for a moment. Nothing dramatic, just enough for intuition to whisper, something isn't aligned. Modern social environments rely on cooperative illusion. People maintain harmony by overlooking small contradictions. But individuals with strong pattern recognition struggle to ignore them. They simply notice too much. And when you see patterns others ignore, you begin filtering your environment. Which leads to the second trait: low tolerance for social entropy. Imagine sitting at a dinner table where the same topics repeat. Weather, office gossip, celebrity news. There's nothing wrong with these conversations, but after a while something strange happens. You feel mentally exhausted, not because the conversation is intense, but because it feels empty. Some brains naturally seek complexity, ideas, systems, long-term questions. But many social spaces revolve around repeated information. At first you participate politely, then gradually you speak less. Not because you dislike people, but because your attention searches for deeper signal. Over time, this naturally reduces the number of interactions. The third trait appears mostly in groups. Authority friction. Many social circles operate through quiet hierarchies. Opinions everyone maintains. Assumptions nobody challenges. A discussion begins. Someone makes a confident claim. Everyone nods. Then one person asks, "Why do we believe that?" The room becomes quiet, not because the question is aggressive, but because it disrupts consensus. Psychologists observe this dynamic in the Asch conformity experiments. Most people follow group opinion, even when they privately doubt it. But a small percentage rely on their internal reasoning instead. In analytical environments, engineering strategy research, this trait is extremely valuable. Socially, however, it can create tension. The fourth trait appears in many people with smaller social circles. Architect focus. They are often building something. A business, a research direction, a creative craft, a long-term vision. When someone enters deep focus, their social bandwidth naturally decreases. Weeks turn into months of concentrated work. Meanwhile, friends continue meeting regularly. Gradually, the invitations slow down, not out of rejection, but because availability patterns changed. This stage often feels like isolation, but in reality, it's resource concentration. Around this point, many people ask themselves a difficult question. Am I becoming too disconnected? To answer that, we need to understand another trait: the reflective effect. Quiet individuals sometimes make others uncomfortable. You enter a room. You say very little, yet someone reacts strangely. This usually isn't about you. When people encounter someone calm and observant, they often project their own assumptions. Carl Jung described this as shadow projection. Insecure people assume they're being judged. Competitive people assume they're being evaluated. Defensive people assume they're being criticized. Your silence becomes a screen, and people project their own narrative onto it. Over time, some individuals simply interact less. The sixth trait involves time perspective, temporal orientation. Most people focus heavily on the present, immediate experiences, immediate rewards. But some individuals naturally think in longer timelines. 5 years, 10 years, sometimes decades. While others discuss weekend plans, their mind quietly evaluates long-term outcomes. Not anxiously, just automatically. Their mental horizon simply extends further, which can make certain conversations feel disconnected. The final trait explains why some people remain comfortable with fewer social rewards. Internal drive architecture. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi described the autotelic personality. People who find satisfaction in the activity itself. They read because they're curious, train because they value strength, build because the process feels meaningful. Their motivation comes from within the activity, not from external approval. Many relationships rely on validation exchanges. Approval for approval, attention for attention, agreement for belonging. But internally driven individuals depend less on those loops, which can quietly reshape their social environment. When these traits combine, something interesting appears. Not a loner, not a misfit, a strategic individual. Someone capable of independent thinking, someone comfortable collaborating, but not dependent on constant approval. This psychological pattern appears often in fields that require long-term judgment. Research, entrepreneurship, strategy, creative work. Because sustained thinking requires cognitive space, there is one final principle that explains much of this. Think of emotional expression as capital. Every reaction spends some of it. Some people spend it constantly. Others suppress everything. The most effective individuals manage emotional capital deliberately. They invest it where it matters. In meaningful relationships, in leadership moments, in decisions that shape the future. This isn't emotional distance. It's emotional allocation. If you recognize these patterns in yourself, the goal isn't isolation. It's calibrated interaction. Choose environments carefully. Protect cognitive bandwidth. And invest deeply where real alignment exists. Because one aligned mind can replace dozens of casual connections. Having fewer friends doesn't automatically mean something is wrong. Sometimes it simply means your mind prioritizes signal over noise, structure over surface, trajectory over moment, which leads to a simple truth many people eventually discover. The goal isn't having the most connections. The goal is having the right ones. Crowds provide noise. Alignment provides direction. And often, solitude is where independent thinking quietly grows. Think about your own life for a moment. Have you ever noticed a social pattern long before anyone else seemed to see it? That moment often reveals how your mind processes people. If these ideas resonate with how you observe people and systems, this channel explores similar psychological frameworks about decision-making, influence, and long-term thinking. You're welcome to explore further.